She filed on a Monday. By Friday, my face was on the cover of Forbes. My name is Leonard. I am 49 years old, and I want to tell you about the single strangest week of my life, which began with a process server at my front door on a Monday morning and ended with my wife seeing my face on a magazine cover at an airport newsstand on a Friday afternoon. She was flying to see her attorney. I did not plan any of it. I want to be clear about that from the beginning, because the timing is the kind of thing that sounds constructed, that sounds like something a person arranges for effect. It was not arranged. It was simply what happened, in that order, in that week, and the universe did not ask my permission before organizing it that way. Let me go back further, because the week only makes sense inside the longer story. My name is Leonard Marsh. I started a software company at 34 after 12 years working in enterprise technology for companies that were not mine. The company was not glamorous in its early form. It was a workflow automation platform for mid-sized logistics businesses, which is the kind of description that ends conversations at dinner parties. I knew what it was capable of, and I knew what the market looked like, and I knew that the businesses who needed it most were the ones who had not yet found language for what they were missing. Building it took 4 years of difficulty that I will not minimize here. There were quarters where I paid my employees before I paid myself. There was a year where I remortgaged the house and did not tell my wife the full reason why, because I was afraid the full reason would end the marriage before the company had a chance to prove itself. I told her we were refinancing for a better rate, which was not a lie, but was not the complete truth. And that partial truth has sat with me since, in the way that compromises made under pressure tend to sit. Her name is Claudia. Claudia and I had been married for 16 years when she filed. We met when I was in my late 20s, before the company, before the remortgage, before most of the defining facts of my adult professional life had been established. She had married a man who worked long hours at other people's companies and seemed capable and driven in the way that a certain kind of ambitious person always seems capable and driven, without any specific evidence yet of where that capability was heading. She was patient with the company in the early years. She was patient with the hours and the stress and the financial anxiety. But patience has a structure. And the structure of Claudia's patience was built on a particular belief: that the difficulty was temporary, that we were moving towards something, and that when we arrived at something she would be able to recognize it as the thing she had been waiting for. The difficulty became the texture of our life, rather than a passage through it. That is what she could not adjust to. Not the hardship itself, but the duration of it. The company grew, but it grew slowly, and the years of real financial pressure left marks on both of us that we handled differently. I handled it by going deeper into the work. She handled it by going somewhere I could not follow and eventually could not find. By year 13 of the marriage, the distance had become structural. By year 15, it had become permanent in all the ways that matter before anything is legal. She filed on a Monday morning in March. I opened the door at 7:45, and the process server handed me a manila envelope and apologized in the specific way of process servers who have learned that an apology fills the silence better than nothing. I thanked him. I closed the door. I sat at the kitchen table with the envelope for a few minutes before I opened it. Then, I went to my office. I tell you this not to suggest I was unaffected. I was affected. But I had been living in the anticipation of this moment for long enough that the moment itself arrived with a quality of finality that was, in a specific and uncomfortable way, almost a relief. The waiting was over. The shape of what was next had become definite. I called my attorney. Then I called my CFO. because there were financial implications I wanted to understand quickly. Then, I went back to work. Now I need to tell you about what had been happening at the company for the previous 6 months, because this is the part of the story that determines everything else. The platform had broken through a ceiling we had been working toward for 3 years. A series of enterprise contracts in the fourth quarter of the previous year had moved us from a mid-market company to something the industry was beginning to pay attention to at a different level. Our revenue numbers for the fiscal year were significant. Our growth rate had attracted a quality of outside interest that changes the conversation in every room you walk into. 4 months before Claudia filed, a journalist named Patricia Huang had reached out to me through my communications director. She was writing a feature for Forbes on founders who had built durable companies in unglamorous verticals, the businesses that process the world rather than dazzle it. She had been following our trajectory for 2 years. She wanted access, interviews, background, time with the team, the long-form version of a story she believed was worth telling. I had agreed. We had spent 3 months on the piece. It was thorough in the way that good journalism is thorough, meaning it asked questions I was not entirely comfortable answering and found dimensions of the company's story I would not have chosen to lead with, but which were true. Patricia was fair, and she was precise, and she had no interest in the version of the story I would have preferred to tell. The piece was finished. It had been through editorial. It was scheduled. I did not know the precise publication date. On Monday morning, I received divorce papers. On Tuesday morning, my communications director sent me an email with a subject line that said the Forbes issue was closing, and the cover was confirmed, and the publication date was Friday. I read that email at my desk, and I sat with it for a moment. Then I forwarded it to my attorney, not because it was legally relevant, but because I needed to send it to someone, and she was the person I was currently paying to be on my side. She wrote back and said, and I have kept this message. She said, "Leonard, the timing of this is either God's sense of humor or the universe making a point. Either way, manage it professionally." I took that advice. The week had its own momentum. Legal calls, financial disclosures beginning, the procedural machinery of a divorce starting to turn. I participated in all of it with the divided attention of a person who is managing 2 large and consuming things simultaneously. I was also preparing for the media attention that a Forbes cover generates, which is its own particular kind of work. Calls to schedule, talking points to sharpen, the management of a visibility that the company needed to use well. Claudia and I did not speak that week. Her attorney had been in contact with mine. That was the channel now. On Friday morning, the issue published. My communications director sent me the cover image at 6 in the morning. It was a photograph from the shoot they had done in our main office. Me standing in front of a wall of server infrastructure, jacket off, sleeves rolled. The particular composed expression that photographers work 40 minutes to get out of you, because it takes that long to stop performing and just be a person in front of a camera. The headline beside my face read, in the large, clean font that Forbes uses for cover lines, something about building in the unglamorous and getting it right. I am paraphrasing because I do not want to reproduce it exactly, but the meaning was that. Someone who had worked in the background of the economy for long enough that the background had become very large. The issue went to newsstands that morning. Claudia was flying to meet her attorney in person that afternoon. They were in different cities, and this was to be their first face-to-face strategy session. She was flying out of the regional airport, the smaller one, which has a single terminal and a single newsstand near the security checkpoint. I know what happened next because Claudia told me. Not that day, not that week, but several months later, during a mediation session that had reached a point of unusual candor. She told me because I think she needed to tell someone, And I was, despite everything, the person she had known longest. She said she had been walking to her gate. She said she was thinking about the meeting ahead and what her attorney had advised her to prioritize in the early sessions. She said she was tired in the way of someone who had been holding a difficult decision for a long time and had finally acted on it, and was now discovering that acting on it did not produce the relief she had expected. She walked past the newsstand. She said she saw the magazine from several feet away. The way you see something when the scale and the color and the composition of it catches your eye before your brain has processed what specifically you are looking at. Then, her brain processed it. She stopped walking. She said she stood in front of that newsstand for what she believed was a full minute, though she acknowledged it was probably less. She looked at my face on the cover of that magazine. She looked at the headline. She looked at the issue date, which confirmed it was current, which confirmed this was not something from the past she had somehow missed. She said she picked it up. She read the first 2 pages of the article standing at the newsstand, which meant she read the section that described the company's trajectory and the revenue figures for the current fiscal year, which were in the piece because Patricia had asked directly, and I had answered directly because I believed in doing that. She put the magazine back. She walked to her gate. She said she did not call her attorney to cancel. She kept the meeting. She told me she was a person who had made a decision and she was not going to unmake it because of a magazine cover. And I believed her because that is consistent with who Claudia has always been. But she said, in that mediation room, with both attorneys present and the careful neutral furniture of a conflict resolution setting around us, she said that standing at that newsstand was one of the most disorienting experiences of her adult life. She said she had spent 16 years married to a man she believed she understood, and in that minute at the newsstand she had encountered a version of that man that the 16 years had not fully shown her. She said, "I knew you were building something. I didn't know it was that." I said, "I know." She said, "Why didn't you show me what it was?" I thought about that question. About the remortgage I had called a refinance. About the years of going deeper into the work while she went somewhere I could not follow. About the particular way that the people closest to you can sometimes have the least accurate picture of who you are becoming, because proximity and history are not the same as seeing clearly. I said, "I think I was afraid that if it didn't work, and for a long time it looked like it might not work, I didn't want you to have watched it fail." She said, "And if it worked?" I said, "I thought you'd see it when it worked." She looked at me. She said, "I saw it at an airport newsstand." The divorce was finalized 7 months later. The settlement was handled without significant conflict, which I attribute in part to both of us being exhausted, and in part to both of us having enough integrity to recognize what was fair and agree to it without requiring a judge to tell us. I still run the company. The Forbes piece did what good press does, which is open doors that you then have to walk through yourself, and I have been walking through them. The company is not the same size it was when Patricia Huang wrote about it, and it will not be the same size in 2 years that it is today. I do not regret the work. I do regret the refinance I called a refinance. I regret the years of going so deep into what I was building that I forgot the person who was supposed to be watching it get built. Claudia has her own life now. I hear about it occasionally through the thin social current that connects people who share a history. She seems well. I hope she is. Somewhere in an airport in another city there is a newsstand with a different magazine on the top rack. A different face looking out at the people walking to their gates with their carry-on bags and their tired concentration. I walk through airports with some regularity now, which is a feature of the current version of my professional life. I always glance at the newsstands, not looking for myself, just looking. The way you look at things when you have learned that the world will occasionally arrange its timing without asking you, and that the arrangements it makes are, if nothing else, honest.